Hey there, podcast listeners. Exciting news. My new audiobook, The Short Book Formula, A Financial Professional's Guide to Writing a Book in 6 Weeks to Attract Ideal Clients, is out now. And the best part, for a limited time, we're offering this audiobook to you for free. Hurry over to www.theshortbookformula.com and claim your copy now. And now, on to our show. Hey everyone, this is Paul McManus, and I am the host of the $1 Million Producer Show. And today we have a very special guest with us, Mark Larivee. Mark is the CEO of Attorney Tax Savings, and he helps attorneys and partners at law firms all around the country save a significant amount of money on their taxes. And so, Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Now, before we get into some specific cases that I think will be very interesting and useful for any attorney watching this, tell us a little bit more about, in my experience, a lot of advisors typically are very general in terms of who they serve. But here you are, you're in Colorado, and you serve attorneys nationwide. What was it that attracted you to working with attorneys and partners at law firms?
Well, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and my family produces hot rod shows. And I left, largest producer in the world. And I left in 1988 for family reasons. It worked out really well. But I moved to Colorado Springs, and I needed a new career. And so I got into financial services. I actually, in those days, they had a test that you would take. And I flunked the test. If you got like 17, you were doing pretty good. You had a chance of success. I got a 4.
Okay.
So, and I did that 3 different companies, and I got the same score everywhere, 4 or 5. But a guy offered me a job, and I got into the business. And, when you start, you are a generalist, as you call it.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul, do you need auto insurance? I sell it. Do you need health insurance? I sell it.
Exactly.
Renters insurance, you should have that. I sell that. Life insurance. Oh my God, I'll take you to dinner. So
sure, there you go.
So that's where you start. But then you find out what you like and where you're good and where you're bringing value. And so health and auto and renters and all that went by the wayside very quickly for me. Yeah. I did money under management for a while. I decided that I don't believe I can bring value in that world. That's a whole conversation we could have that I'm happy to share. I have some pretty interesting and factual data to back that up, actually. And so I got out on money under management, and I was fortunate enough, I was doing some marketing to AM 100 law firms. And I was fortunate enough to go to a firm up in Seattle, Washington, and made a presentation. And it took a year, but they ended up executing this transaction. And then I worked with a smaller firm, 3 partners in New Jersey, and we did that. And then I worked with a couple individual lawyers. And, I think some people think lawyers are like life insurance salesmen or car salesmen. They're not nice people. I can tell you I've had the opposite experience, that when you talk to these real quality high-end lawyers, they're ethical, they're moral, they're smart, they have great personalities, and so they're the kind of people you want to do business with. And I've really enjoyed it. So that's kind of how I got in. I started marketing, and then the further in I get, the more I like it. So really all I do today is market to lawyers, firms and individuals across the U.S. I strongly believe that it's 2018, I think.
Still, yep, another 10 days or so.
2020, 2022, somewhere in there. Nobody's going to be meeting face-to-face anymore. It's just not efficient. And so I feel like I'm one of the pioneers just because I don't know everybody else is trying to do it. But, most of my work is done on Zoom. And I feel like I can develop a really great relationship and understand somebody and their concerns. And backwards, they can see me and get comfortable. And, will we meet eventually? I hope so. but that's not a requirement anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned that one of your key clients, one of the key firms that you worked with is an AM 100 law firm. Can you share a little bit more detail about what was it that you specifically helped them with?
Well, are you familiar with the term BOLI?
Yes.
Bank-owned life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So banks for 30 years now haven't been investing in especially designed life insurance packages. And today, 2018, there's 190 billion in cash value in BOLI. So some of the smartest financial people on this planet are bank managers for the big banks. Wells Fargo's got 42 billion or 30 billion. I can pull those numbers up and be exact, but all the banks are buying BOLI, and they're buying it because they've realized that if it's built correctly, it's an asset class.
Yeah.
And so now every AM 100 firm is different. So some are partnerships, some are C corps, some have benefits for their partners, outside health insurance, some don't. I was joking with the managing partner of this firm a couple months ago, and I said, I'm trying to do another one. And he said, well, how's it going? And I said, well, I figured out what I need. I need a managing partner that's a bit of a dictator with a finance background. And he just started laughing.
I can imagine.
But it's true. So in their particular fact pattern, it got easier because they do have a obligation to the partner if he dies on the job. So if you were a partner at that firm and you passed away while you were an active partner, they would owe your wife or your heirs some money. And so they were funding that with term insurance. Yeah. And I simply showed them how it would not only cost them any money anymore, but it would turn into the largest asset the firm has. And it has.
Very cool.
It's taken some time. It's not I'm not a magician. But you have to realize the markets are very, very efficient. And so anytime you see something that doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't. Yeah. On the other hand, if you think stocks aren't going to perform bonds over the next 30 years, I'm going to tell you need to go back to school, because that's the way our country is built.
Yeah.
There's things you can do.
I remember in one of our past conversations, you had said that the firm that they hadn't yet figured out what to do with this new asset that they had. They were still trying to figure out how to use the money or use the asset. Have they figured that out yet?
No. Okay. If I understand the AM 100 world correctly, and I think I do, it's all about profits per partner. Yeah. So you've looked at those lists just like I have. Sure. And over on the far right, you can say, this firm's average profits per partner is $300,000, and this firm sitting in Washington D.C. is $600,000, and this firm in L.A. sitting in Los Angeles County, they're at $600,000 or $700,000, and so their goal is to get up profits per partner. So the fact that they now have this large cash asset, they're trying to figure out how to apply it to profits per partner. I mean, there's other things they can do. They can buy their building.
Sure.
They could buy one of their buildings. They're in, I don't know, 10 states. They could buy one of their buildings today. They got enough money. They could buy another one, 2-3 years down the road, and they could slowly own their buildings, as an example. And would that raise profits per partner? I think it would, because you wouldn't be paying rent.
Yeah.
And you're giving your partners, depending how you structure it, another benefit. So, but in answer to your question, no, they haven't decided what to do with it yet.
It's a good problem.
Spent a couple hours on it. That's a good problem. In the meantime, it's sitting on the corporate books, growing tax-free.
Yeah. Now, as an example, so this transaction and this client of yours that's an AM 100 firm, and you work at the firm level. But I also know that you do work with individual partners, whether it's an AM 100 or a smaller firm. Can you give us a sense of the kinds of opportunities you're seeing to help partners at firms significantly reduce their taxes above and beyond what the firm is doing?
Well, that's kind of changed over the years. So, I mean, the first thing is simple. I have this software that we built. I say we, I didn't, but I have access to it.
Sure.
And we call it the tax trap, and it's relatively simple. What it does is it shows you how much you can expect to have in your pension plan. I should preface this.
Mhm.
Most lawyers are saving money in pension plans. And it's kind of a pyramid. You know, they start with their IRA, and then they go to their SEP, and then they go to the 401k, and then they go to their defined contribution plan. Those are all forms of that. And then they go up to a defined benefit plan where they can put away $300,000-$400,000 a year on a tax deductible basis for some period of time. And so they're building very large numbers in qualified money. And I don't know what you consider large numbers, but I'm talking $6, $8, $10 million in qualified money. And so in a very quick basis, I can show them how much it's going to be, how much they're going to have to take out in retirement, whether they want to or not, RMD, required minimum distribution, and how much they could take if they wanted to and spend it down to zero, how much the tax is going to be, and how to discount that tax. That's a pretty simple process, but that kind of starts the whole.
Well, you say it's simple. I mean, for you, it's simple because you're the expert and you have the tools. Let me ask the question: is for the attorneys and the partners that you're working with, do they generally know these numbers? Do they have an awareness?
They generally have a good sense of the accumulation phase, we call it.
Sure.
What they're going to have at 65 or 70. I'm going to have this much money, I think, based on. You can do that on Google. You don't need me for that. You know,
Sure.
that's a fairly simple calculation. You can just go to an investment calculator and get that. What nobody really focuses on is what does that mean for me?
Yeah.
And then the other conversation I have around that is, and I'll give you a loaded question, Paul, because I like doing that. It's more fun for me. So are we in a low tax bracket historically or a high tax bracket right now?
We're probably at the lowest tax bracket we'll be for any one of our lifetimes.
So historically, it runs in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We think 35 is horrible because this is all we know.
Sure. Everything's relative.
Right. There's a good chance things are going up. So we have conversations about all that. And, and let me first say, I'm a big believer that you do fund up that pension plan as far as you can.
Okay.
The question then is, now what do we do with it?
Yeah.
So, so if you can put away $200,000-$300,000 and get a tax deduction for that money up front and then let it grow tax free, yeah, you're going to pay taxes on the backside. And yeah, they might be higher, but it's still the first thing I would do. Is fund that retirement plan. And so one thing I do quite often for smaller firms is I set up those retirement plans for them.
Okay.
I mean, I set them up. I don't, I have resources. I belong to the largest, we call it a producer group. I mean, I have these associates that are way smarter than me that do very specialized things for the right fact pattern. So my job in my world is to find out where you're sitting and what might bring you the best value. And then I actually have my associates present it to you.
Yeah.
Well, you could do this. And you kind of run through the numbers and say, well, that's good. You could do this. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do that. So, so I feel like we could bring value more often than not.
Yeah.
Not all the time. Sometimes people are doing a great job and good for them. Then all I can do is say, you're doing a great job.
Well, so tell me a little more about that. So, the attorneys and the law firms that you work with, I mean, these are very smart people. They're typically very successful people. They've been doing this for years. They're making big incomes. And so my assumption is that they already have typically, CPA advisors and whatnot. Where is it that you're filling in a gap that they may not be aware of, or share more about that if you would?
Sure. Let's start with the CPA, but then I want to come back to the advisor.
Sure.
And I'm going to call it their investment broker, not their advisor.
Okay.
Their investment broker.
So
let's talk about the CPA for a minute. If you go to the average CPA in LA, and he's got, one of his clients is this AM 100 lawyer, that's making $1 million a year. This is not an uncommon fact pattern.
Yeah.
How many clients does that CPA have that are making $1 million a year?
Probably about 1 to 10, if that.
Not that many. And so he's not working in this world. And so he's not seeing everything that's there. I mentioned, I don't do all this. I have associates. So I don't know how to do all this stuff, but it's out there. And it's not necessarily tax aggressive. In fact, I don't actually believe in tax evasion. I think last time I checked, that's not a good idea. But there are things you can do that are not commonly marketed, because if you're on the other side and you're the guy providing the service, there's not very many, it's less than 1% of the population that would find your product attractive.
Yeah.
And so, it's marrying those two and saying, look, I got the one guy, he's part of the 1%. Yeah. And over here, I got the guy that knows how to do something. So,
it brings up a good point, right? So just using that as an example, if you're using, say, a local CPA, and to your point, they don't typically work with, these very high income, high net worth attorneys. They're not the expert in all these things. Where you conversely, which is very interesting, you are in Colorado, you work with attorneys and law firms around the country, but that's all you do day in, day out, is that you focus on attorneys and law firms that are really in that top percentage, and all of the strategies that are either available. Doesn't mean that you're the expert at them, as you said before.
Right.
You identify the pattern, and you bring in, if it's a little bit outside of your core wheelhouse, you bring in the exact expert who is that person, but you're able to identify those things very, very quickly.
Yes. And that little tax trap thing, I'll call it little just because it takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Sure. That helps to start the process.
Yeah.
Because, I'm gathering some data and I'm getting a sense of who you are and what drives you and what your concerns are. And then, if we work together, I'm going to want to know most things, because I don't want to do something for you that doesn't fit your overall plan. So I'm going to want to work with your CPA, not against them. I'm going to want to work with your investment broker, not against them.
Sure. Well, and that's the other thing, which I think is very unique about you, is that, you really take what I would call a needs discovery approach. I think you call it a fact-finding approach. And it's not, okay, I have this one solution. This one solution is going to, solve all problems. You really take the time to get to know the person, perhaps their partners, perhaps their wife or spouse, and really find out what their priorities are before you ever get into what a solution may or may not be. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate. So some people are driven by, I have a client I'm working with right now on the East Coast, and he's got 3 pensions going right now. And he's at an AM 100 law firm, and he's going to get a 4th one.
Okay.
So he said, I think I've overdone it. Yes, sir, you've overdone it. Good for you. Good for you. Well, and I also have these assets and these assets and these assets. And so his whole driving force, if you will, is how do I make sure I'm good to go? If I live to 110, I want to know that I'm fine and, I'm safe. And if I need long-term care, I want to know that's covered. And I need all that. But having said all that, he is good to go. So now what can I leave my kids? And how can I do that best? And how can I make it the biggest number I can? What does that all look like? You can create these days foundations, and you can reward behavior by your descendants, 2 generations, 3 generations down the road. So you can do a lot of really great things for your family and people that you care about and things that you care about. I got another guy that's, really into the Middle East and getting people over there to educate. And, he wants to build a foundation that's doing that now while he's alive and doing that later when he's gone. So yeah, every case is different. Everybody's got it, and then there's people that all they want to do is build wealth.
Sure. Well, talk to me about that a little bit. I mean, so I know one of the, drivers for a lot of people that you work with is not just wealth, but legacy, whether that's, whether it's their children, whether it's charitable work, whether it's wealth. Can you speak a little bit about a legacy? And maybe it's the individual, maybe it's, the managing partner at a firm. What is it that you help them establish in terms of helping them clarify their goals and what's possible?
At that AM 100 firm that I work with, at the end of the day, I said, we're going to build a $30 million pot of money. Would you like that? He said, I would really like that to be my legacy, that when they come in here 20 years from now and that money's sitting in the firm, they say, yeah, he did it. Yeah. So from a corporate viewpoint, that was his legacy. Yeah. Usually personally, legacies are running around your heirs. Yeah. Your children, your grandchildren, a lot of times the grandchildren, because these guys, gals, a lot of these successful attorneys are 60s. I'm 62. If my kids aren't good to go by now, my money's probably not going to help them.
Sure.
I mean, they're in their 20s and 30s, so they should be out there working and, doing their thing. But to be able to help, we're going to come into times of crisis. In fact, I think we're looking at one right now. But yeah, so we're going to come into those. So to have this nest egg over here, this trust account that could, help with challenges is pretty attractive to most people.
I think that's amazing.
I want to talk about investing for a minute because you said CPAs and then I said investment broker.
Yeah. So I said advisors and then you said investment brokers. How do you distinguish that in your mind?
Well, the lawyers I'm talking to are usually making quite a bit of money. And so how do you invest in the stock market? Well, the two most common ways are mutual funds and picking stocks. And what I'm seeing is that most of these wealthy attorneys have a stockbroker. They do not buy mutual funds. And see, now I mentioned to you that I managed, $30 million at one point in my career. I was doing money under management. And this is a true story. I'm managing 30 million. I'm pretty good at it. I'm working it hard. My assistant is 60 years old and she starts this breakfast investment club with three of her little old lady buddies. And every week they go out for coffee and they pick their stocks. They beat me for 2 years running. And I had to say, why? And so, and the reasons are there, and I can share them. I don't know, I'll show you what I take on that, but the reasons are there. These mutual fund companies, one, there's a lot of ways they can cheat, but even if they're not cheating, they have very big limitations. So if they think, this is the next greatest stock on the planet, they can buy like 2% of it as part of their overall portfolio. Whereas Judy, my old assistant, she say, I'm tripling down, man. So, and what I do know today is, you can Google this. What I do know today is that 80% of the mutual funds out there underperform their index in a given year. So let's talk about the S&P 500. The S&P 500, you can go buy the Vanguard fund for 5 basis points. That's what it costs. That's a management fee. Or you can go buy a mutual fund that's got a 1 to 2% disclosed expense ratio. And I say disclosed because it's more, you just don't know it. And 80% of them are going to underperform the index anyway. And then the 20% that do overperform it, the second year they never do. So I'm going to argue that stock pickers are a lot better than mutual funds. And then I'm going to argue that indexed product is better than indexes. And that's a conversation maybe we could have another time. But there's indexed product where you can get the returns of the index without the volatility. And I think that's, for part of your portfolio, that's a great solution. I'm not trying to replace your great stock picker, that's getting 10, 20, 50, 20%. That's great. But you got somebody you're trying to earn 5 to 10 on or 3 to 7 on, and that's where this stuff really comes into play.
Well, so expand upon that. So, we talked about how, one of the challenges with your people CPAs typically is that they're not specialized in this area. Also, the investment person, typically that's the one thing that they do, so that, when you're talking to them, they're always going to be talking about the one solution, how to make it and how to improve upon that. What I think is so unique and about you and the work that you do. Tell us a bit more about how is it, you're almost like the quarterback, right? You're almost like the quarterback that these top attorneys and law firms need to really identify the opportunities, and then you bring the resources to the table specific to them, how it makes sense, if it makes sense. Can you expand upon that at all?
Yeah, I can try. First of all, there is something I do myself. So people inside that producer group look at me for a certain thing.
Sure.
Which is called this rich man Roth, which is a BOLI. It's bank-owned life insurance. Again, it's life insurance done in a way that it's an investment, absolutely not a death benefit. I'm very good at that, I don't mind saying. But I have an associate that knows how to he does two things at once. He'll take some of your pension money and turn it into a tax-free account. So it was going to be taxable in the pension, and he turns it into a tax-free account. And at the same time, he takes another asset of yours, let's say your house or part of your broke, and he turns that into a Roth IRA. And when he does all those things, if you project it out 10 or 20 years, I don't care how you try to break it, you can't break the tax leverage. So, you can say, well, what if it's 6? What if it's 4? What if this is 7? Nothing's going to matter. It's going to outperform because it's growing in a much more favorable environment. And I don't do that. Another good example is, if you're going to
you don't do it, but you
I bring in the guy.
Yeah.
I bring in the guy, and he does it. I'm there. You're going to be my client, but he's going to design it and make sure it gets done correctly.
Yeah.
And if I meet with you and you're, a relatively new firm, don't have to be new, but you've never heard of defined benefit plans and you're making money, you're going to look at a defined benefit plan and say, why wouldn't I, where have you been? This guy the other day said, where have you been my whole life? So he said, well, we're here now, so we're here now. So do I do the third-party administration on qualified plans? I do not. I take that to another firm that does that exclusively and helps you. And am I there? Yes, I'm actually you're my client, but they're going to do the backup work for us.
Yeah.
I got another associate that swears if you've got 100 employees or more, he can cut your health insurance premiums by half. And I looked at all of his stuff, and he's not lying. It's true. He's got an article from Forbes. You can't always trust Forbes, right? But he's got an article from Forbes that predicts that in the next 5 years, 40% of that 100-employee marketplace will be doing this instead of what they're doing today. 40%. Costco's doing it right now.
Very cool.
Which I think Costco's clearly a well-run company. I buy there. So.
Are there any other specific fact patterns or cases that would be important to share? I don't know if it's about maybe transitioning or any others that come to mind that are relevant for the purposes of this discussion.
I think honestly, I would say something to the effect of, if you're making $500,000 plus, let's talk. If I can help you, I'll tell you I can, and I'll show you how. If I can't, I'll tell you I can't, and I'll tell you when we should talk again. But, it's all about, well, that's not exactly true. If you're making $500,000 and you're spending $600 on lifestyle, I can't help you.
Okay.
So, but if you've got,
I think we have a performance coach that we then.
Right. That's right. We do have somebody that can help them. That's a good point. We're going to change your lifestyle habits. But I think it's really that. I think it's if you're, and these guys, these people are making good money. They're successful in their careers. They've worked hard. And so they're making good money. And my whole thing is, how can we best help you to make sure you don't waste it?
Yeah.
And not end up where you could have been.
Yeah.
Um,
Tell us a little bit more about, going back to, you mentioned it before, that you think that what you're doing currently is the future in terms of working remotely with these clients. Tell us about what your experience with that's been, and why is it the future to you? Why does it work for you?
well, I've been marketing to the legal community for about 9 years now. And for the first 6 or 7, I flew to New York or DC or Seattle or wherever, and I traveled, you'd have to ask my ex, but I'm going to say 150 days a year.
I think if we asked her, it'd be like 250.
It was a lot. I traveled a lot, and I enjoy travel, but not too often, but I'm going to say a third of the time. I would get to New York and they say something came up, can't be there. And they're not doing it, for the wrong reasons. Something came up, and they live in a very crisis-oriented world.
Yeah.
I just got this case, and I got to prepare. I got to go in front of the judge next Tuesday. Well,
yeah.
I just got bumped, rightfully so.
Yeah.
So that still happens to me all the time now. And all we do is reschedule. They'll say, I can't do 2:00. Okay, next week, Thursday, what day works for you? And we just move it. And I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting in front of my computer. So if you'd have called this morning and said, I can't do noon, we're going to have to do next Tuesday, it really doesn't affect me to speak of.
Yeah.
And vice versa, on the other side. And the other big difference, though, is this. It's this Zoom call. It could be GoToMeeting, it could be anything, but where I can see you and you can see me.
And why is that important?
Well, I've done business now with people that I've never met, but we feel like we know each other. And is it nice to meet face to face eventually? Sure, but we read faces for a living, all of us, and so I think that you can either get trust, and you can do it just as well on Zoom. And I'm actually more effective, I feel today, doing this than I am walking in with a laptop. I had 3 screens here. I can have 3 screens up and ready to go, and I can share stuff with you on a 2-second basis and say, this is what I'm talking about. Whereas if I'm in your office with a laptop, I got to close that folder, I got to find that folder, and maybe I'm good at it, maybe I'm not. I'm not. So it's much more effective, I think, and a better use of time.
I think also
time is money. Time is money.
Sure. And as you said, it's for everybody, you as well as the people that you're dealing with. And especially if you're dealing with attorneys that are, in that 500,000 plus income bracket, time's extremely valuable for both of you.
Yes.
I think one more area there is that, especially as you bring in specific specialists or experts that may be appropriate to the fact pattern that you're describing, imagine that, on Zoom, you have, someone like Joel out in Los Angeles, you have you in Colorado, you have your client or prospect,
in Bethesda.
Yeah, exactly. None of you had to travel, but it just gives you more ability to really offer the top-notch solutions to the people that you're working with. And
service, go down the road. Now when you want to do your annual review, we don't book an hour-long meeting in your office. We get on the internet for 20 minutes, and if we need a little more time, we schedule another 20 or whatever. I mean, everything's just more efficient. And I'm saying because of video capabilities, which better than me how long they've been around, but people are really starting to use them now, I think. And because of that, without that, I think it's a phone call, and I'm just not sure you're going to get there.
Yeah, no, I think the phone. I was just talking to someone yesterday who I turned on to Zoom, and I hadn't spoken to her for a few weeks, and of course now I train everyone to get on Zoom, and she's like, it's hard to go back to the phone now. It's just so hard because once you get used to this, this is, I think, as you said, in some ways better than meeting in person for the reasons that you described. and it's just more efficient, it's more effective. I mean, it's. Is there any downside? Maybe is there any downside that you've seen in terms of this approach that you're using?
I haven't seen downside. I will tell you, I have 6 kids. My oldest son moved back to Michigan. I'm in Colorado. I came from Detroit. He moved back to Michigan to learn how to install hardwood floors. I see him more now than I did when he lived here, because we do Zoom calls. The old days, he used to say, "I'm going to come by at 5 o'clock," and he never showed up. And, sorry, Dad, I got tied up. He's 24. I get it. Nowadays, we do a Zoom call. Sunday at 2 o'clock. Let's do a Zoom call, and he's there. And so that's another good analogy of the difference. What's the downside? I don't see one. I guess I'll think about that. If I come up with something, I'll call you. But
well, I'll tell you what the downside is, because I've been doing this for, I don't know, 4 years or more. I used to have a completely local business. It was all about local, small community. In the past 4 years, I've been doing this remotely online. And here's the downside, is that you have to figure out reasons to go outside. It's like, well,
right. You got to get your Fitbit on.
There you go.
You got to try to make sure you get some steps. Because it's easy to just sit right here and do business. And I love what I do. So
I can go to Amazon. I can order food. I can do all these things. So yeah. Well, this has been fantastic, Mark. Is there any questions or anything else that we haven't covered so far today that you think is important for someone watching this to be aware of?
I think we've done a great job. The last thing I would say is know that the financial services industry, loosely speaking, has also progressed greatly. So it's much easier to do business on the life insurance side, on the investment side, than it used to be. So a lot of the walls that were up are gone. I'll give you one last quick example. A good friend of mine here in town, he's a mechanic. He owns a mechanic shop. I've known Dwayne for 40 years, and he's retiring and selling to his younger mechanic. Not a big sale or anything, And so Tom called me. That's the younger mechanic. He called me and he said, "I need some life insurance." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Mark, I'm in perfect health." He's like 44. "I'm in perfect health. I can't even look at needles." And I said, "No problem. Penn Mutual will issue you a policy in an hour. They'll call you. They'll do a phone interview. If you're really in perfect health and your MVR is clean, an hour later, they're going to have an offer on the table and you'll be good to go. They don't need blood anymore." It's like, oh my God. So, and we did. An hour later, we had a policy for $250,000 that he could use for his collateral assignment at the bank because he's financing through a small business loan. So you can carry that out through all the other pieces, if you will. That AM 100 firm, they have 500 partners and insured. Nobody's ever taken a physical. That's not true. One guy has after 8 years, and that's because he messed up. So generally speaking, so it's gotten easier. You should know that. I think it's gotten easier to do business and do business effectively and execute as well. So
fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. As our guest on the $1 Million Producer Show, we greatly appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. All right, bye for now.